I'd like to suggest that the heart transplant procedure that we hear about in the first reading of taking the stony hearts from our bodies and putting in their natural hearts is not always an easy or quick operation. And it seems to me that the clean water that sometimes is poured on our sinfulness or in our bodies when we're injured isn't always an experience of pleasure, but sometimes pain, as we recognize the healing that's taking place in the wound. And that Jesus, in telling this very stark, difficult, challenging parable to the chief priests and the elders of the people, is doing it because he wants to have that heart transplant operation, that he cares about them, and he wants to warn them of the danger of the course that they're on. So I wish sometimes the scriptures were a little easier to even preach or proclaim, but that's not what Jesus is about. He's about this healing process, and that sometimes it needs this type of radical story to wake us up and to see the need for God to work in our hearts, and to see the danger of what I sense here is maybe being played out is, to think about it. If somebody fairly famous invited us over for a feast, we probably would at least consider going. And here is this story about the king who was inviting them to this banquet, and the fact that they were saying no to that already is an indication of the danger perhaps that the chief priests and the elders of the people were experiencing and in fact living through. And Jesus telling them this is so as to wake them up, which it seems to have done to some. Joseph of Arimathea, one of those who came to help at the time of Jesus' burial, was one of those leaders. So maybe he could have been in the crowd hearing this parable and said, I've got to change my ways. I need to recognize where I'm indifferent to this blessing that is trying to break into my life to give me a new heart. And how do I do that other than by asking God, seeking it, responding to it and saying, am I missing something? Or help me, Lord. Help me to see. Help me to welcome the healing that you're saying to me, even though if its initial approach to me might be somewhat painful because I've been living in a way that's inconsistent with your call. How do I continue to ask Jesus to speak those challenging words to me, but to do it like he's doing it here because he loves me. He wants me to grow and enter into my life in a way that he's willing to say sometimes the difficult things, to wake me up, to say you're heading down the wrong path or have lost touch with the very purpose of your life, to do God's will. And here, Jesus, what a compassionate man who's willing to upset us sometimes to wake us up so that we would never neglect the invitation from our King. Seems to me that that's what Mary and her queenship must be continually active in helping us in the same way to distance ourselves from anything that would be meaningless or harmful or offensive in God's sight, and draw us more and more to be engaged in things that are truly called wholesome, holy. These are the invitations I sense that Jesus is doing, and what this clean water will do for us as we welcome it and engage it now in a very intentional and personal way, that we might be responsive and welcoming, attentive to the Lord's approach, even if initially it might seem a little painful or unclear. Welcome him.